Hello everybody. I'm currently at the Ron John free shower area behind Ron John's at Cocoa Beach. Taking a shower to cool off and clean up right after work. And I thought, since I'm at the beach, I think the most appropriate story to start off this channel will be a story that takes place at the beach. The year is 1978. I am a 12-year-old military brat living in Howard Air Base, which is also connected to Fort Kobe, in the Panama Canal Zone. Little did I know that I was actually living in paradise. But this story isn't about paradise. It's about the beach. For those who've been stationed in Panama, you know how exotic that place really was and how special it really was. I've never been to another place like that. There are like butterflies there that are like this big. And they're like swallowtails. They have those fancy tails, and they're colorful, like all colors of the rainbow. And mangoes would just grow in our backyards. You could just go to the back of your house and pick up a mango from the tree behind your house. And we had papayas, and I remember behind my house there would be monkeys and sloths that would come down from the jungles. We didn't have woods over there, we had jungles, real jungles. They would come down and you know, eat various foods and stuff that people set out, usually fruits and whatnot. But anyhow, my friends and I, we were all like military brats. Some were, actually everyone there at my location was all Air Force brats. The two bases, Howard Air Base and Fort Kobe, which was Army, were connected together. You went into Howard and then you went on to Fort Kobe in the back. Well, all the military kids would play with each other, obviously, because, you know, we were on a military base and you kind of played around with the kids in your neighborhood. And I was 12 years old at the time, and I was in 6th grade, okay? And we used to go to the beach, my friends and I, and we would ride our bicycles to the beach. It was like a long ride, I think like maybe 10 miles. And you actually had to go through the jungle. You had to, we took the road from Howard Air Base and rode on through to Fort Kobe, went by the school that was there, then continued on down some dirt roads that the military used for maneuvers and practice and stuff in the jungles. And you actually go out all the way to the jungles. And after about 10 miles of traveling through these woods, or not woods, but jungles, you come out upon the beach. And what was interesting about this beach was the side that you come out on, okay, it was the left side. I don't even know if that's north or south. I think it's the south side. The south side of the beach, you come out and you see this like big open beach area. And there's like a huge river, probably about 40 or 50 feet wide, like the mouth of a river, a small little river, flowing to the ocean. And where the water flows out at the end, there's these big clumps of rocks, and the water hits it, and splashes really loud. And then beyond those rocks, there's an island, a little tiny island that is out there. It's like an island probably only about like maybe I'd say like 100 feet wide, 100 feet around. You know, it's a small little island with, I don't know if it even had any trees. I don't think it had any trees on it at all. But it's just a little island out there in the water. And what was cool about it was, during low tide, the water level would go down so low that this river area would drop down to be only about like 1 foot deep. It would narrow down from this 40, 50 feet wide river mouth to a little tiny stream that was about 1 foot deep, and you could actually just walk across it. I'm opening the door here, it's got hot. Anyhow, when we got there this one day, the tide was high, and I went there with 2 other kids. I still remember them. Bert, who was 11 years old. No, Bert was 10 years old. And Ernie, who was 7 years old. So we had a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old who rode our bikes out to the beach. And decided to do something foolish. Now, this story could have had a tragic ending, but I'm telling you because it didn't have a tragic ending because I'm still here. Anyhow, Bert and Ernie, isn't that funny? Bert and Ernie, aren't they like from Sesame Street? I'm wondering if I can get a name. No, it's Ernie and, yeah, I think it was Bert. They decided they wanted to go out to the island. I mean, not go out to the island, but to cross the river. Yeah, the big 40-foot wide river that separated this side of the beach from the other side. They decided they wanted to cross over. And when we started to walk across, the water came up here to this level on my shoulder, okay? And so we said, man, the water's too deep to make a crossing. So we thought we couldn't do it. Then we had this brilliant idea, which is really a foolish idea, okay? And that was to make a human chain. The kids, we were all going to hold hands, you know, like gingerbread men, and hold hands and go across the river. You know, with 3 of us, we figured we could walk across the river even though the water was coming up to my chest level here. Almost to right here, around my nipple area. Anyhow, it would come up to this height and push, but with 3 of us holding hands, we figured we would be able to do it. So I decided that since I was the biggest person, I should head out first. And then Ernie would hold my hand, and then Bert would hold his hand. So we started to make the crossing into the river. And as I got deeper and deeper, the water started rising first at my waist level. Then it got up higher and higher, all the way till it got up to right here, my shoulder, almost my shoulder level. Okay, and I felt the rocks underneath, the pebbles underneath, and they were like starting to rock back and forth. And I was starting to lose my stand in the water, and I'm like, oh my God, please, Ernie, don't let go. And then I glanced over at Ernie, and this is what I see. Remember, Ernie was only 10 years old, and actually smaller than me. The water was up to like this on Ernie, and he had his head up, and water was hitting his chin. And I looked beyond, and I saw Stanley. Stanley, who was only 7 years old, was even shorter. And the water was like... And Stanley let go. Then, as soon as Stanley let go, Ernie, who was holding on to me, let go. The 2 of them quickly rushed over to get back to the shallow side that we had tried to cross from. So I found myself standing in the middle of this water, rushing out. And I was like wobbling back and forth saying, oh my God, please don't let me slip. And I could feel the pebbles underneath, the rocks. They weren't really pebbles, they were like big rocks, rocking back and forth underneath my feet. And sure enough, the water pushed me down and started to pull me out with the tide. Now, if you've ever experienced tide water, then you know that that is really powerful. When the ocean is receding, when the tide is going down, the water actually rushes out really fast. So the water was rushing out and pulling me towards those rocks. You remember the rocks at the end of the the delta, I guess the mouth of the river? The water was hitting it and smacking it and splashing everywhere. It was pulling me towards those rocks. And I turned around and I started swimming with all my might towards the mouth of the river to try to get away from being pushed out into the rocks at the mouth of the river. And I swam and swam and swam and got really, really tired. And I looked over and I saw that Ernie was standing there on the side. You know, he had moved to the shallower side, but he was just standing there, and I wasn't making any headway. I was staying in the same spot. I was swimming as fast as the water was pushing me out. And I was like getting really, really tired. Then I looked at how far Ernie was, and I knew I couldn't make it to Ernie and Stanley. They were both there screaming. And then they said, "You're not going anywhere." Then I decided to turn to the left. That meant I turned towards the other side of the beach. And I swam and swam and swam with all my heart, with all my breath, and I barely made it to the edge of the beach. I had never, ever been that exhausted in my life before. I laid there on the beach for a moment to catch my breath, and I could hear the tides in the ocean. And I remember looking up, and the rocks where the water was hitting was only like about 20 yards away. 20 feet, 20 yards, I don't know. It was close. Close enough that I could hear the water splashing and hitting it. And I was thinking, that could have been me. I could have been tossed onto the rocks and broken into a million pieces. Meanwhile, Bert and Ernie were on the other side of the beach. And I looked up at them, and they were like about 50 yards away, maybe even more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get across this water. And I'm on the other side. What are we going to do? Well, you know, back then we didn't have cell phones or anything like that, so the only real way to get help would be to send a runner for help. The problem is, we were in the middle of the jungle. This was not a little tiny jungle. This is the Panamanian jungle. There are jaguars and gorillas and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. I mean, there were real creatures there. Like even the tarantulas there were like giant size. Everything's like giant size in Panama. So we thought about it, and I was like yelling at Ernie across the river, and I was like, you know, you guys might have to get on your bike and ride back into the base and tell the police that I'm stuck over here. So they would send the military to come rescue me. Because we were out there for like at least, I think we were there like at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, trying to figure out how I could get across the water, you know, to swim across. And decided that, you know what, we were going to wait for the tide to go down because we knew it was going down. So we knew that if I stayed long enough, the tide would actually go down low enough that it would only be a foot deep, you know, at the mouth of the river. So, but we didn't know how long that would take. I guess evidently the tide takes about 12 hours to rise and fall. I think I know that now because it's based upon the moon and the night and day and stuff. So I think high tide and low tide takes approximately 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, we stayed there for hours waiting for the tide to go down, and it, you know, it didn't look like it was really going down. And the sun was starting to set, and we started to panic, and we were like, you know, if we have to tell the grown-ups, the adults, we are going to be in serious trouble. I mean, we had a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old out in the jungle all by ourselves, and our parents were all military. Now, you might not understand the significance of this, but the way things work kind of in the military, if the kids get in trouble, sometimes the parents get in trouble. That means that if Ernie, Stanley, and I got in trouble for being out there, for doing what we did, then all our parents who were military could have gotten into serious trouble and received punishment for it, for us misbehaving or us being caught out there in a dangerous situation. Well, we really didn't want that option. So I looked at the water and I saw that it had started to go down, and then I started to formulate a plan. You know, what was I going to do? How could I make it across to the other side? And, you know, because the tide wasn't going down fast enough. It had been about 3 or 4 hours, and it looked like the tide was still pretty high. The mouth of the river, the delta was still pretty large. So I said, you know what? This is what we're going to try to do. I'm going to set up Ernie and Stanley as like goals or posts for me to swim towards. So what I would do is I would put Ernie down one, you know, first, like maybe about 25, 30 yards away where he could stand. And then I would put Stanley further, like Ernie would be here and Stanley would be here, further away. I know it looks backwards here. Stanley would be here, further away. So if I swam by and I missed Ernie, because I was going to swim towards Ernie, and Ernie was supposed to catch me. And if Ernie missed me, then I would swim towards Stanley. And then Stanley would catch me. And if Stanley missed me, I would swim to the island, which was out there. And then I would wait on the island until the water went down. And then I'd probably have to try to ride my bike home in the dark through the jungle. That's the brilliant plan of a 12-year-old kid on how to get home without getting his parents in trouble or his dad in trouble. So what I did was I went up towards where the mouth of the river was. I went up as far up the jungle as I could to where the water was flowing out. And then I set Ernie up, and I set up Stanley. And prayed, took a deep breath, and dove into the water. And I started swimming. I looked at Ernie, and I started swimming and swimming towards Ernie. But the water was pushing me out so fast. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss Ernie. And sure enough, this is Ernie. And I went, and I'm going to get him, and whoosh, I missed Ernie. That's okay. We still had Stanley, you know, as a failsafe. Well, Stanley was my backup, and then after that we had the island as a failsafe. Assuming I could make it out there without drowning or getting eaten by sharks. There are sharks out there in that water. So I started to swim. I missed Ernie, and my heart just sunk. But I was like, can't panic now. Must swim towards Stanley. So I saw Stanley up ahead, and I started to swim closer and closer towards Stanley, and whoosh, I missed Stanley. And I started panicking now. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die at 12 years old. I'm going to drown. Or I'm going to be a castaway on an island. And I heard Ernie and Stanley screaming something. And I couldn't tell what they were screaming. But it sounded something like, ah, ah. I was like, what? Now the water was in my ears, and I was splashing and just going totally crazy. And I was panicking and thinking, oh, I'm never going to make it. I got to make it to the island now, because if I don't make it to the island, I'm dead. And I could hear Ernie and Stanley screaming louder and louder. Yeah, ah. And I couldn't understand what they were saying because I was in such a panic. And then suddenly, my knees scraped on something like sandpaper. It wasn't sandpaper, though. It was the sand. I had swam past Ernie and past Stanley to the point where the water was only like about 2.5 feet deep. When my knees hit the sandpaper or hit the sand on the bottom of the beach, I stopped panicking and stopped swimming and just stood up. The water came up to my knees. That's how shallow the water was. And I was swimming so fast trying to make it to the island. And Bert and Ernie were yelling, "Stand up!" And that, folks, is my beach story of the island. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. Alright, I just realized why I kept saying Bert and Ernie. Bert and Ernie is from Sesame Street. No, my friends weren't named Bert and Ernie. One was named Ernie, okay? Ernie was the 10-year-old. The 7-year-old was not Bert, okay? The 7-year-old was Stanley. That was his name, Stanley. I must be getting old.